fellow who goes to the UK and sets up the first department store.
Oh, wow.
And it's in England. It's set in England at the exact same time period. And so these types of dramas set in those time periods are great. They tend to not focus so much on the zeitgeist. Well, Downton Abbey does. It sort of brings in the backdrops of various different things. It started off with the sinking of the Titanic, so we know exactly when that series starts. And then, it's the titled nobility, so their connection to a lot of the people who drowned in that tragic event. So they sort of kick it off with something historically set, which I liked about it. But then it's kind of, it's pretty dry drama, but people love it and they watch it. They watch all over the world. They watch it.
So how would you capture that audience? The Downton Abbey, the Boardwalk Empire, and the sci-fi people, because I know you said you want to tackle that too.
Yeah, well, the sci-fi part of it is subtle to begin with. For me. I mean, I have the series opening in my mind anyway. Tesla laying on his deathbed in the New Yorker hotel in 1943. And he's not exactly on the moment of death, but he's getting a couple weeks to that point, and he's really taking inventory of his life. One of the things that a lot of people have written about him, even the people who are really into the hardcore facts, is that he was dabbling in remote viewing.
Nice.
And this type of thing. So I can imagine him at those last days, just sort of, when he had been ostracized and really marginalized as a crazy person. And he was having this, repeated relationship with this dove, things were really going weird, right? And maybe a little bit of, dementia sitting in, or people perceiving it as dementia, perhaps. He's doing this remote viewing inventory of his life, where we're able, as a plot device that allows us to go into not only his perspective on a wide variety of historical events that he himself was involved in, but he can go backwards and forwards in time and actually see inside of the minds of other people that he was involved with, hear their thoughts, see from their perspectives. It creates a plot device that allows us to move around with impunity.
I never knew about the remote viewing thing. That's interesting.
It's funny. I thought I created that. I thought I made that up. And then I was in New York, and I was talking to Mark Seifert, who's very well respected as a Tesla historian, has a couple of doctorates and has all the rest of it. And he himself acknowledged to me that was actually true, that he was dabbling in that kind of sort of science. And I just was amazed. I thought I totally made that up. And apparently, according to the resident expert, it's actually a fact. So he thought that was really a cool way of going through the whole archive of history, because then we don't have to have a linear story. We can jump around to disparate elements that seem disconnected in a linear time frame, but are so intricately connected in a nonlinear sense. It allows us to step outside of Tesla and go into other storylines. So I would not only like to be telling the story of Tesla, I would like to be telling the full life story, or not the full life story, but getting a good, proper sketch of John D. Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan, Mark Twain, Joseph Pulitzer, Amelia Earhart, a lot of the people, Booker T, people who are really important, even Walt Whitman, because, there's crossover all over the place. We're talking about New York, right? We're talking about Paris. We're talking about Prague. We're talking about what is modern day Croatia and Yugoslavia, or former Yugoslavia. So there's a lot of history there that overlaps, and there are people that Tesla was involved with that aren't as well known, perhaps, as others. Guggenheim, the Wright, what's his name? Frank Lloyd Wright.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And so those people have very dramatic elements of their life, right? And they contributed to the overall historical zeitgeist of the time, of which Tesla was at the pinnacle. Because at the time, when he was in New York, he was one of the most famous people on Earth. People don't realize that. They think, he was never well known, because he isn't known now. No, actually, at the time, he was very well known. He was so well known that people were traveling all over the world to meet him. There's a really cool sort of aspect of New York social life at that time, right around the time when Tesla showed up, and it really sort of played itself out, called the Gilded Age, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the center of that was this society called Ward McAllister's 400. That's something you Google, and it's essentially a group of 400 people that were on a list of approved socialites. And they considered themselves to be the nobility of America, the aristocracy of America, living in New York. And you can imagine who was on that list, like Vanderbilt, Carnegie, John Jacob Astor, all these types of people. And all these people had dealings and interactions with Tesla. So it's just such a rich period, so many people to go into, so many different possible storylines when you consider all those people involved. I see that as a way to pitch it to these people who like historical drama. It's more of like, we're using Tesla as our lightning rod, and Tesla, we keep going back to him because he's really the most fascinating one of the most fascinating people of all these fascinating people. And it becomes almost like a story competition. Which story can up the next one?
Mm-hmm. And it goes back to kind of what we were saying. He really is the key to what's missing in history. Like
he's the key to that moment in history because he was on the precipice of changing the world forever again, a second time, right? Because he did it a first time already with the advent of AC current.
Yeah.
And then on his side projects, he dabbled in X-rays and created the X-ray machine. Or on the side, he created remote control. On the side, he created the logic gate, which is the foundation for all intelligent computing today. On the side, he created the first transistors, which allow for the first wireless communication.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then his main focus, like his second major focus, well, of course, people who know Tesla well know, was wireless energy. And people really don't like this idea of free energy. When you talk to the average person about free energy, they just immediately write you off as some quack.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody who's listening who doesn't understand that free energy exists, because I'll explain it to you, it's very simple. The solar wind blowing off all the suns in the universe, but particularly our sun, has an interaction with the Earth's various atmospheres, particularly the ionosphere, which is a charged electrical particle sphere, which wraps around the Earth and then warps right through the poles and essentially creates this magnetic field. And it is an actual generator itself. So it demonstrates how magnetic fields in oscillation can capture positive and negative charge electrons coming in from the Earth's or from the sun's atmosphere and turning it into a power generator so strong it actually rotates the Earth.
Fascinating.
And Tesla discovered this through his own means. That I don't know how he came across it because there's no real data to say. He didn't publish a lot of things that revealed his secrets. He did publish things that you can find on the TeslaCollection.com, for example, is a very good place to go. You'll see articles, hundreds of articles written by Tesla or about Tesla from the era of his life. And you can read in detail all the things that he was saying in the published archive. So there's lots to read about him that he wrote. So you go to TeslaCollection.com, you can read those things. And then he has his autobiography. But really it's still wrapped in mystery because the people who were financing that particular project were behind J.P. Morgan, and when J.P. Morgan felt that Tesla had already been sort of scooped in radio and the wireless transmission of radio and sound across the Atlantic, he stopped financing Tesla. And Tesla actually made a mistake in doubling the size of his tower in Wardenclyffe without the financial authority of J.P. Morgan, and that just created a rift and then pulled the plug on him. Now, is there a conspiracy there? I don't know. Certainly, we're going to play on that. But
well, especially Long Island.
Yeah,
let me just say.
So after this whole event, and that's where the whole concept. People don't realize that's where the whole concept of free energy was born. Was when Tesla was playing around with wireless transmission of energy through ground carrier waves. People think it was through the air. He was going to send lightning bolts through the air. No, that's not how he was going to do it. He used his tower to create a synergy between the of the Earth, which we know as the Schumann resonance, and then started resonating at a frequency that would act as a carrier wave so he could transmit electricity through the ground, which is actually a much better conductor of electricity than the air. So these are just principles that people just have no open mind to. They won't even listen to you long enough to hear you tell them.
Well, it's because the overshadowing of the tower. Everyone thinks it was the death ray, and it was not. It was not. It had nothing to do with the death ray.
No, the death ray's directed energy weapons, which, by the way, are in use and were employed during Star Wars defense system during the Reagan era. That's all Tesla technology. Of course, you get credit for it, but the point is that the pretense and the whole idea of that is predicated on lasers, and then the use of lasers and the intensifying of lasers as directed energy weapons, which was something Tesla worked on for decades. And all that information, I don't know what he did with it. I don't know if he got rid of it or just didn't write it down for security reasons, or it got scooped up by the FBI when they went into his apartment in New York. I don't know. Those are all things we can explore in the context of this series. So I don't know if I'm going off track here, but I just wanted to say all those things because, yes, I mean, all this information is either very factually true or the rumors are based on something that happened. And so from an historical point of view, you're getting a very interesting story that this is going to seem like science fiction, but is in fact absolutely true.
And that's the most fascinating thing about Tesla. You know, when I started learning about him, is the more you learn about him, the more you're like, how do people not know this? And is this true? Like, did he really do this? And the more you learn about him, not through other people's opinion, but him, and you see what he was doing, his mind, and how he invented things, and how he put so much time and effort, and you could see, like, this isn't just some guy who just is left out of history by accident. It's there's something there, that this guy had something, and people don't know it. And I really feel, one of the most important missing parts of history. You learn who Tesla is, and then everything around you makes sense. Everything around you, like, all the pieces start coming together, and you're like, oh, okay, so that's why we don't have flying cars. Which, by the way, there was an announcement that we are soon, but this month supposedly. But in general, you realize, something's been held back. I'm not going to feed into anything, but something's been held back. And
well, here's a good example. Here's a good example of, in some business sectors, things are pushed forward. In others, things are held back. Well, here's a perfect example. In, what was it? When was the first phone? Those big bricks. That was like 87.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so here we are, 30 years later, and we've got supercomputers that have 300 to 300 times the power of the computers that were building sized back in the 60s in a little phone. Okay, so the technology has advanced so rapidly in that sector because that's the nature of that sector. They want us to be involved in this. There's some sort of agenda there that wants us to be hyper-focused, hyper-connected, for whatever reason. Whereas you have the combustion engine, which, back almost 140 years ago was invented, and hasn't really improved a whole lot since then.
Exactly.
So there's obviously some technology being held back there for a very obvious reason, and that is profit.
Yeah.
And, I don't believe, like a lot of people believe, that there's a one world government blocking all, but I could be wrong. But the point is that it's pretty obvious certain technology has been held back for very obvious reasons of economic agenda.
And it just doesn't need to be anymore. And that's the thing. If people are aware of these things, then next we're not having to worry about these things anymore. And that's simple. It is that simple. I mean, I'm not going to say anything about certain facets of, parts of media and stuff like that. But it's up to us to really kind of one by one be like, no, I'm not dealing with that anymore. I don't believe it. And it's it. Like the whole protesting, like you were saying earlier with Leo, Leonardo DiCaprio in New York. It's things like that. I know people are like, "Oh, well, protest, you're not going to get anywhere." Well, it is. It is getting somewhere. It's